Let's start by reciting this year's motto for Vision 2020. Let us become true owners of Chonil Guk, who practice true love in resemblance to our Creator, the Heavenly Parent. So, the theme today is Keep Hope Alive. And the question is, how? How do we do that? How do we keep hope alive? I'd like to cite a very influential psychiatrist in the last century, Viktor Frankl. He stated that ever more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. And I'd like to cite one particular work that he wrote soon after being released from the Auschwitz concentration camp, where he was incarcerated during World War II. And in this experience, during this time, he was describing in this book his psychotherapeutic method. Basically, it was a survival method which involved identifying a purpose in life to feel positively about, and then immersively imagining that outcome. So, according to Frankl, the way a prisoner imagined the future affected his longevity. He identified 3 psychological reactions experienced by all the inmates to one degree or another. So, first reaction was shock. I've been incarcerated and this is terrible. The second was apathy during the incarceration period. You get into the daily role of being a prisoner, of being powerless over your environment, and you just go through the motions, you numb your senses in order to survive, basically. You can't allow yourself to feel anything because otherwise you're just gonna die, basically. So you turn into this apathetic creature. And then upon your release, the reactions of depersonalization, moral deformity, bitterness, and disillusionment came about. So the first was depersonalization. It's a period of readjustment in which the prisoner gradually returns to the world. Initially, the prisoners were so numb that they were unable to understand what freedom means or to emotionally respond to it. Part of them believed that the freedom that they were experiencing was some kind of illusion that was just going to be taken away from them. But gradually, they were able to break out of that situation. And then it begins the second stage of moral deformity. As the intense pressure on the mind is released, mental health can be endangered. So Frankl uses the analogy of a diver who's suddenly released from the pressure chamber and comes up to the surface too fast. He says, he recounts the story of a decent person in the prison who became immediately obsessed with dispensing the same amount of violence in judgment of his abusers that they had inflicted on him. So upon returning home, the prisoners had to struggle with 2 fundamental experiences, bitterness and disillusionment. And then this led to the third stage of this last section here, and that was the disillusionment. And it was the discovery, in this instance, that the suffering does not end, that the longed for happiness will not come. So what kept Viktor Frankl alive during his time in incarceration was thoughts about his wife, seeing her again, and thoughts about a task that he had yet to fulfill. He was a university professor before he was incarcerated, and he was imagining that in the future, after he left this experience, that he was going to be lecturing, in the halls of the Vienna University, and he could imagine himself talking about this experience that he was now having. And that thought of having that task awaiting him in the future is what kept him alive, because it was a meaning that he was living for. So, in his particular case, most people, when they get incarcerated, they get released from jail, they go back to their home. But in this case, there was no home to go back to. Everything had been destroyed. His family had been murdered. So, for him, this was the most difficult task to overcome. But as time passed, he noticed that the prisoner's experience in a concentration camp just became a distant nightmare, a remembered nightmare. And there was nothing left to fear except God. That's how he put it. But that was a healthy kind of fear, respect, I should say. So, so the conclusion of this book is that a prisoner's psychological reactions are not solely the result of the conditions of his life, but also from the freedom of choice he always has, even in severe suffering. He talks about the last of the human freedoms. He says, between the stimulus, the experience that's happening to you, and your response to that stimulus, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. The wider that space, the more deeper, I guess, or higher our spirit is. But in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So if we have just a knee-jerk reaction to the world around us, then that is a very typical childlike or immature response. We're basically wanting to just respond in kind to what we're experiencing. But real change doesn't happen that way. Real change occurs when people are able to respond in a unique and loving way no matter what is happening to them. I guess Jesus would be the first person that comes to mind when you think about what happened to him, the way he was treated, and the way he responded to that treatment. You can see exactly that Jesus was a free person. He chose his response. It wasn't an automatic kind of, oh yeah, I love being tortured. Yeah, thank you very much. That is a very, very loving response. I heard this, but how do we get to that point? How do we get to the point where we're able to give a loving response? I heard this analogy given once by Dr. Wayne Dyer. He asked the audience, if you get a banana and you squeeze the banana, what kind of juice comes out of the banana? And the answer is banana juice. And if you get an apple and you squeeze an apple and crush it, what comes out of the apple? Thank you. That was just, two people know the answer to these questions. For the rest of you, if we are squeezed, if we are put in a very difficult situation, okay, what kind of response comes out of us? That is where we're at. That is called fallen nature. Okay, so in our church, we talk about fallen nature a lot, and we talk about overcoming it. But how can you overcome something that is invisible to you, that you're not aware of, that you don't know exists? And that is why when we are put in these difficult situations, what comes out of us is really the core of what is inside of us. And I'm often shocked when I'm driving what comes out of me. Because in civilized society, if I'm stimulated in a negative way, I will often keep my mouth shut and not, let on how I'm actually feeling. But when I'm in a car and I know that the person in front of me who just cut in front of me can't hear what I'm saying, whoosh, a lot of stuff comes out that I'm not proud of. And especially if my children are in the car, I have to be double conscious, like, wait, they can't hear me, but my children can. So I've got stuff to work on. that is revealed to me through those situations of being squeezed. Okay? In our family life, we are being squeezed. What comes out of you in family life? Is it a sense of annoyance towards your children, annoyance towards your spouse? Do you have a loving response to them? Do you have righteous anger sometimes, or is it more of a self-centered approach? It really all is stuff that we need to look at in our life. But getting back to my point, what is my point? Keep hope alive, thank you. Okay, keeping hope alive means having a vision of the future, having a goal for the future. And again, going back to Frankl, everything can be taken away from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This is what he called the last of the human freedoms. And in this sense, he considered himself to be more free than the guards who were incarcerating him, because he felt that their life, and there were good and bad guards and there were good and bad prisoners, but he felt that their life is pretty much, they're not free. They're told what to do and they do it. But he felt that even though everything had been taken away from him, his family, his clothing, his dignity, he still could choose his attitude. And that was one thing that was the last freedom that could never be taken away from him. He still could choose his attitude. The inner hold a prisoner has on his spiritual self relies on having a hope in the future. And that once a prisoner loses that hope, he is doomed. So if you lose hope of seeing your loved ones in the future, in that situation, if you lose a sense of accomplishment for the future, like I need to do this, I need to get out, I need to accomplish this thing, if you have no vision of what you want to do in the future, if you have no person that you want to see, then basically in that situation, in those environments, you're doomed. But in a modern day environment where we're not in concentration camps, we go about our daily life, and yet we still have no vision of the future, no people that we long to see, no relationships that we long to build, no thought for anything that we want to accomplish in the future. In one sense, we are also doomed. And Viktor Frankl, who actually passed away in the 90s, he could sense that the modern day person, in other words, people living after the war and up to today's time, have a huge task in terms of finding meaning in their life. And he noticed that in one sense, it's more difficult for people to find meaning in today's society than it was for the people in his own era. So I wanted to go back to the founder of this church, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, when he was incarcerated in North Korea. And I don't know if you've heard about North Korean concentration camps, but they are torturous at best. He used to sing this song, the Song of the Spring Breeze. And you can read the lyrics up here. They're basically talking about, yes, it's winter, yes, it's bitter, yes, it's a horrible nightmare situation, but I know the spring is coming. So when you go through these lyrics, you talk about the ruthless winter winds, you're doomed in a moment. Your savage, bone-chilling cold is doomed. I know the future because I've seen it. So according to the words of Reverend Moon, he used to sing this song to himself in the prison, because he definitely had a vision of the future. He was, considered himself the person who needed to help God to accomplish God's will on the earth. So he had that vision, and in fact, when he was in that situation, incarcerated in North Korea, he used to pray to comfort God, because he looked upon God as a parent, looking down on him as a child, and feeling miserable that his child was in that situation. So as a loving child, his response was, don't worry about me, I'm going to be fine. So again, choosing your response, that is your level of freedom. That is the mark of who you are as a person, is being able to choose a loving response in a miserable situation. So that's something we all need to work on, obviously. I mean, in my case, I can only speak for myself. I don't know about you guys, but that's what I need to work on. The coming future world, this is from Reverend Moon, is a world of new culture of heart and the culture of love based on the true family, where God, human beings, and all things live in harmony. It is the world of interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universally shared values, in which people live for the sake of others in true love and live together in harmony and cooperation. Sounds good? 2 people agree. So anyway, how does this world happen? You know, again, we go back to the stimulus and response. If we're treating each other badly, we treat other people badly. This goes on and on and on and on. So when Jesus talked about turning the other cheek, what was he talking about? He was talking about that gap, the gap between stimulus and response. You know, if somebody slaps you on one cheek, you offer them the other. Is that some kind of masochism? Perhaps, but he's talking about that response. Someone asks you to go 1 mile, you say, fine, I'll go 2 miles. He's talking about choosing your response. So when we talk about creating this world, this vision of the future, then how is that ever going to happen without choosing our responses? If we keep on going the way this world is going, then it's just going to keep on going the way it's going. But if you want to change direction, then it has to happen through a dedicated effort of people growing spiritually and morally and maturing as people, just like Jesus and Reverend Moon showed us how. So again, Gandhi, another spiritual giant, said, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. So we have to be the ones that make that happen. It's not going to happen automatically. It's going to happen through dedicated effort and spiritual growth. Thank you for listening, and please join me in prayer. Our Heavenly Parents, thank you for this opportunity that we have to gather here today to be reminded of the course that human history has taken thus far. It has been shaped and guided by the wills of people on earth who have been either under the influence of evil, selfish influences, or under the influence and respect of you and your heavenly guidance. We sincerely hope that we can choose to reciprocate more and more with your word, with your heart, with your truth, with your goodness, and become the people that can shape our lives and shape this world in the direction of goodness. This is something that we have been given the power to do. We can choose that task. Our Heavenly Parent, we hope that we can have the moral strength, the courage, and the dignity and the integrity to follow our hearts, our consciences in accomplishing these tasks. We pray this as your sons and daughters in the names of Jesus and our true parents. Adieu and Amen.